to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Friday, everyone. I know it's been a minute since my last video. I apologize. It's been pretty busy here at the cottage, and sometimes it's just hard to get into my kitchen to work on projects or to edit video. So I've decided for the foreseeable future, probably until the end of July, I'm just going to focus on trying to get one video out a week on Fridays. For today's video, I tackled some DIY projects. I just kind of pulling some wood items that I had in my stash and making them over to fit into my Patriotic display. I love the way they all came out. I hope you guys like them too. And without further ado, let's get to today's projects. My first project for today are these wood blocks. These were given to me by a customer of mine. I have a few more that I can use down the road, but for today's video, I pulled out 6 of them and I began by giving them each a good sanding. I wanted to get the letters off and sand away some of that original color that was on them. Once I had all the sides of the blocks sanded down pretty well, I went ahead and cleaned them back up again and then brought them back out for a base coat of this Rustoleum 2X spray. This color is called Espresso, and since I'm going to be distressing these blocks a little bit later on, I wanted a darker base coat on them so that when I do distress, this will be more of the color you see under the paint. Now, of course, these projects are going to be going into my Americana display, so the colors I chose are red, white, and blue. For the white, I'm using DIY's White Swan. This is Carnival Red by DIY, and then for the blue blocks, I am going to be using Hey Sailor. I did end up going over each block with 2 coats of the DIY paint, and once all sides were completely painted and dried, I took them outside to do some sanding and some distressing. I'm using my orbital sander on its lowest setting with some old 220 grit sandpaper in it, so it's not taking off too much paint at one given time, but it is exposing a little bit of that brown and even some of the lighter color underneath, and the 3-tone effect is just beautiful. I absolutely love the way that the distressing came out on these. Once I was finished sanding all of my blocks, I took them inside to my sink and rinsed them off really well, and then set them aside to dry completely before moving on to the next step. For this step, I am using the Redesign with Prima stamp set called Alpha. I pulled out the letters USA, and for the blue and the red blocks, I'm using Redesign with Prima's semi-permanent ink in white, and I'm very carefully inking those stamps up, and then one at a time laying them down where I want them, and then using my fingers to apply some pressure so that I get a good impression. For the 2 white blocks, I'm using StazOn black ink just so that it stands out really, really well. The only thing left to do is to seal my paint, and for this particular project, I chose to go with a spray sealer to prevent smudging any of my letters. So I'm just giving them a quick coat of Rustoleum clear matte spray, and then my blocks are finished. I love the way these guys came out. I think they're super cute, and I hope you guys like them too. For project 2, I am sticking with my Americana theme, of course, and I pulled these chunks of 2x4 that I've had in my stash for probably a couple of years now. I sanded them and painted them white some time ago. I was going to actually use them for pumpkin blocks, but I decided they would make a cute project for today. So I am painting each of these blocks, and these ones I am painting with the Cottage colors. So this is the Cottage color called Pacific, and for the white block I am painting it with the Cottage color called White Linen. And the reason I went with the Cottage colors on these blocks is that I'm going to be putting a stencil over them, and I love the fact that the Cottage colors self-level so they leave a nice smooth surface. I created these stencils with my Cricut, and although I didn't record all of the steps I used to make the stencils, there are tons of videos on YouTube on how to do that. You can see here I laid my stencil down and I'm just peeling off that backer tape on each one of my blocks. And once I have that finished, I can go in and start painting. For my paint, I'm going back to the regular DIY paint because it tends to be a little thicker and I don't have to worry quite so much about it bleeding underneath my stencil. The other thing I like to do is almost do a dry brush. I dip the tips of my bristles into the paint and then I pounce a little bit off onto a shop towel before going in on my stencil. And then I do a few swipes just pouncing the paint on. So very light at first and just darkening it up as I go. And for the colors here, I'm going back to the Hey Sailor and that Carnival Red. Once I have my stencil completely filled in, and I think I went over it a few times, but this paint dries pretty fast, so it didn't take very much time at all. It's time to peel up the stencil vinyl. So I'm carefully peeling that away and then just using my little weeding tool to pick out any remaining pieces of the vinyl. Then it's on to my blue block, and for this one I'm stenciling with white Swan, and again the same procedure, just going in really light at first and then darkening things up one layer at a time. Now, for whatever reason, this wood block was just a little bit rougher than the other, so I had a couple places where I needed to go in and touch up my paint. Once that was finished, I took them both outside and I did a little bit of sanding and distressing. Again, this is 220 grit sandpaper. It's kind of old, so it doesn't have a lot of grit, and I'm just carefully going over the stencils as well as the rest of the block. And of course, next up, it's time to seal my paint. And for these, I decided to go in with DIY wax. I'm starting off with clear wax and I'm being very careful going over the stencil. Again, I don't want to smear my paint all over. So very light touch here. And then when I wipe the excess back, I'm also being very gentle not to smudge my paint. Then I'm going over it with some dark wax. I can be a little less careful here because I have that buffer coat of the clear down. So I'm going over all sides of it with some of the DIY dark wax just to get that beautiful age and patina that I'm looking for. And then it was on to the white block, and I'm using the same procedure here. And in hindsight, I probably would have been better off giving it just a thin coat of some clear spray first. Luckily, I didn't have a lot of smearing, but I did have a little bit in the red lettering. Then once I had it all clear waxed, I did go over it again with some dark wax, and I'm just brushing that on in a nice even coat, and then very carefully, gently wiping back the excess wax. I decided I wanted these to be a little more decorative, so I ripped some pieces of homespun fabric and tied those into a little knot. And then I went and wrapped some jute around the top portion of my wooden block, had to glue it in place. And then once I was done with that, I actually set it up, and it sat kind of crooked because of the jute. So I ended up adding a couple little felt tabs to the other side just so that it would sit straight on a shelf. This is me doing that. And then once that was done, I glued my little ribbon in place, followed by this cute little rusty star. And then I tucked a little bit of Spanish moss around the star and just kind of behind it. For the white block, I created a smaller ribbon using some more strips of that homespun fabric, and then I laid them out and tied them in the center with a piece of that jute before gluing them on. And for this one, I also added a cute little rusty star and some more Spanish moss. And then my two little block projects were finished. Now, I don't know how many of you spend time on Pinterest, but I definitely do. And I saw the idea for this particular project there. I had these spindles sitting around for ages. I painted them up probably a couple of years ago to use for Christmas and then never did anything with them. So I am cutting them down to size. I'm going to make 3 batches. They're going to be fireworks. And so I need a big and a medium and a small for each batch of fireworks. Once I have my pieces all cut, it's time to go in with some paint, and I'm using those same 3 DIY colors: Hey Sailor, Carnival Red, and White Swan. I'm painting the longest of my batches with the blue, the mediums with red, and the smallest with the white. Now, I really considered giving these all a base coat of that Rustoleum brown paint, just so they would all match when I did my distressing, but I decided against it because the colors were still there. I had red and white bases, and I was kind of interested to see what it would look like with the different colors underneath. So I just kind of let things roll, and once my paint is dry, I'm taking them outside and doing some sanding and distressing. Now, of course, these fireworks need fuses, and I have some jute that I plan on using for that. But first, I needed a place to attach the jute. So I drilled holes into the tops of each of my spindles very carefully, and I started with a small bit and then just kind of worked my way up from there until I felt like I had big enough holes that my jute would fit down inside. Before I add my fuses to my fireworks, I decided it would be best to go ahead and seal my paint. So I'm going in again with my DIY clear wax first, just brushing that on in a nice even coat and then using my shop towel to wipe back the excess. And I did this for all of my little spindle pieces. And of course, since I want these to have more of that vintage Americana feel, I am going in with my DIY dark wax next and simply just adding a layer of that to each one of these spindle pieces, and again, using my dry shop towel to remove the excess wax. Then it's on to my fuses, and I'm just cutting some pieces of that jute, adding a dot of hot glue to the end, and then just carefully pushing them down into the holes that I had created with my drill. The last step is to actually create each bundle. So I'm going to be using jute to wrap around the bundles just to kind of hold them together. And this was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, in all honesty, because some of them didn't like sitting next to each other. By the time I wrapped the jute, one of them would be crooked or they just would be kind of off center. So I ended up using a little bit of hot glue to help the process along, and I just had to kind of be patient. This took a little bit of time, but I managed to finally get them all done. I didn't video all three of them, only this first one, because I finished them all pretty much the same. Once I have them stabilized and wrapped with that jute and everything is glued in place, I'm just adding a little homespun ribbon and a rusty star. In the end, even though these were a little more work than I'd anticipated, I really love the way that they came out, and I hope you guys like them too. That is it from here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my patriotic themed DIY projects, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, and then of course just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know if you had a favorite project in today's video. Just a quick reminder too, I do carry a full line of DIY paint and products here in my shop, as well as on my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. And I carry the DIY paint and products as well as Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, in which Sweetie Jane is the color of the month, so that's on sale through the end of June. I also carry some redesign with Prima and of course some Recycled Treasures decoupage papers, so you can check those all out online. For next Friday's video, I already have a thrift haul sitting ready to film in my kitchen. So it's basically ready to go. So there will be that for Friday. So I hope you can join me back here for that. Until then, have a fantastic weekend, you guys, and beginning of the week. Thank you so much for being here. I always appreciate it, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.